Have I lost myself?
Have I lost myself?
How did I get here?
How did I get here?
Okay, here we go. Action. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first edition of Star Wars Philosophies with your host, Sir Jack. My name is Sir Jack. Let me give you a little background on me. Okay, first of all, I saw Star Wars when I was 12 years old. And I saw it 12 times in 1 week. Back in 77 when it first opened up. I've been a lifelong fan. It changed my life. It completely made me not only a musician and filmmaker, but an overall artist to learn as much as I could about the film industry, and also as a basic fan, or as a, like the rest of us, that just loved the fiction and the science and the fantasy of the films. Okay, first of all, I want to say that this is not going to be a regular kind of Star Wars fanboy kind of show. What we want to do here is we want to talk about the philosophies of Star Wars, where its heritage comes from, what George Lucas intended with it. And we want to talk about what Disney has chosen to do with it, where things went right, where things went wrong in the prequels, the originals, and what I like to call the post-quels. It's a made-up word, so don't try to make sense of it. But just so I can separate the trilogies, so you got the originals, the post-quels, and the prequels. Okay? So what we want to talk about is today's question: is The Last Jedi the destruction of Lucas' vision or not? The Last Jedi, the destruction of a Lucas vision or not? So let's talk about that a little bit. I've often heard George Lucas say in interviews that his original intention was to make a kid show or kid movies with things of important questions. It was a family story of good and bad, the struggle of good and evil. Okay, when you've all heard the stories about how sin, the Sith, comes from the word sin and filth, and light obviously represents the goodness of stuff. So obviously the Force was supposed to be a representation of what we consider God. So that was the Force. When people say God bless you, really may the Force be with you, similar kind of feel. No matter what religious background you have, no matter what, there's certain similarities in a lot of them. There are exceptions that think different. So that's when we're going to get to philosophies. We're going to talk about what his intention was compared to where Disney's taken it now. A lot of people were upset, including myself, because I feel like it's straying away from the original Lucas state of mind of what he brought to the table. Maybe it's going a little bit too far, and in the process of trying to bring it to the modern day crowd, is it losing its message? Is it losing its focus? Is it losing its direction? Prime example, today a lot of people want to talk about the balance of the Force, not the good and the bad and the struggle of good and bad. But even in The Last Jedi, which was very interesting, I noticed they paid no attention or importance when it came to Yoda and when it came to Luke Skywalker's at the end when he burns the tree and assumes the books are in there, which is supposed to be the historical accuracy books. All of a sudden there's a sense of the destruction of that. Is it a symbolism of destroying the Bible? Is it a symbolism of destroying books of faith? And it's time to go into a new direction and new belief along with the new system. How people tend to view religion as something that is old school, old style, old mentalities. You know, a lot of older people place their faith in God, and they believe that they truly, genuinely believe there's an upper being that takes responsibility for their lives. Then there's others that feel that the weakness of religion is the fact that it's based on fiction, superstition, and unreality, not science. So therefore, what they tend to do is call it and consider it superstition. If you remember Han Solo talking about in the beginning of the first story, the original, which is episode 4 now, you know, he was talking about this force that's a religious hocus pocus in the Millennium Falcon, when he didn't want to believe in the Force. Then all of a sudden, in The Force Awakens, he says it's all true. It's all true. So there's a sense of character growth that as he got older, as he matured along the way and experienced all these things, he started believing in this thing called the Force. I noticed also that there was a sense of contradiction in the Last Jedi, because is it possible that the reason we have such a huge gap between people losing faith in the new set of Star Wars and really endearing the original ones is because the simplicity of the message used to be a very, very clear one, which is the struggle of good and evil. Evil can only lead to a bad direction, and good can only lead to a positive roll side. Or now it seems that is Disney attempting to say it's all okay. It all comes together and can't live without each other, so we have to have good and we have to have bad. And did they put too much emphasis on the fact that you need the good with the bad, excusing an okay for the bad? And is it steering away from the original message that you always go away from the bad? Even now it seems like there's clubs who wants to be the Sith, who wants to be, you know, the light. You know, you have the Jedi and the Sith. So you're always dealing with these life forces that basically represent society as we know it. Now, if you take the idea of the Sith, you know, the Sith believes they're right. The Sith believes they have the right way to do things. But there's a sense of absolute evil within it, and selfishness and self-attainment, you know, for what it wants. When you see the Jedis, you see the fact that it's supposed to be more of a, you know, selfless desire. And once again, it was always considered a religion. That's why they call it the temples, and, you know, the temple of the Jedis, and this religion-based mentality. However, it seems like we are attempting, or at least Disney is attempting from the Last Jedi to kind of go away from that theme. I'm not saying that's how it left it off with the story, but overall it seems to be getting heavier. That, you know, even if you think about Luke and Yoda burning up the tree at the end, the representation of that, and when they say, you know, it wasn't really a book turner, you know, it was a page turner. Is it a symbolism of imagining, you know, when you search into the Bible for knowledge? And was it almost a sense of like, you know what? We don't need to follow that anymore. We have new knowledge. We have the ability to follow a different road and a different route. And I had a sense of that. Once again, we are talking philosophy here. Now we're talking about out of the basic story of an entertaining movie. We're talking about what is the message that lays underneath that we can pick up from all of it. You know, without a doubt, there seems to be a washing out of the old. They want to go in a new direction. You know, a lot of people were bothered by Luke's behavior and all of this, including Mr. Mark Hamill himself. And even though he has said lately that, you know, he regrets talking the negative stuff, there is something that I 100% agree with, which is the fact that what Luke represents before seems so different what he represents today. The fact that Luke would attempt to kill his own connection to his own bloodline, from his own sister's son, doesn't make any sense. That's why he was saying about Luke, that Luke is too much of the light to have that kind of darkness in him. You've heard it over and over. If he would fight that hard for his own father's life, how in the world would he even so mildly attempt to take the life of his nephew? It just didn't make any sense for the character. So are we trying to throw away the convictions of those religious perspectives that had the original sequels? I'm sorry, the original trilogies. Being brought up on about what George Lucas represented within these characters. Are we getting to the point where, even though it's supposed to be about hope and faith, are we trying to almost take it in an opposite direction? Even if you notice that the character of the who was supposed to help Finn out, turns his backs on him, and it tells him, hey, we built a weapon for the good guys and the bad guys. They build weapons for everyone, and everybody has a role in here to play of destruction. It's not just good and bad, but the bad sees themselves as the good sees themselves as the good. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is almost imagining, why we have religion in the first place, whether you believe in it or not. I've come to the conclusion that religion is there and placed most of the time for the avoidance of chaos and disorder in life or in the world. If you think about it, it gives you guidelines, it gives you rules. Like, let's say, for example, the Bible, it gives you how we should live our lives. And when I sit back and think about it, it really acts as a process of avoidance of chaos and disorder in life. For instance, the Bible gives you, thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that. Well, what is its purpose? Its purpose is to avoid chaos and disorder from establishing itself. Basically, you're dealing with rules. When you have no rules, you have a breakdown of society. You have a breakdown of the sense of rules and regulations, and you stop believing why we believe in anything, and you start leaving room to believe in anything or anything you want to do, whatever's convenient for you at the moment. So when you think back, there's an order to things. There's an establishment to things. And religion, whether believing it or not, tends to establish that in many ways if you think about it. If not, it's everyone for themselves. So let's say there was no God. Hypothetically, there was no force, or there was no idea of that. We would all be living it by superstitious means. But by living by those rules, it would keep things in some kind of guidance and order. Once you take that out, once you take the equation out, then all you're going to have is disorder. You're going to have chaos. And it becomes the Wild West, basically. So I can see the similarities once you throw that out of the equation, that the universe actually gets more wild. Is it possible that the new trilogies are heading in that direction? It could be, because once you take away what's good and what's bad, and you drop the rules saying that, what makes them bad, what makes them good, then you start making all new rules. Even the Last Jedi said, let the past die, with intentions of creating brand new rules, brand new directions, brand new belief systems. We heard a lot about talking about the gray areas of the Force. That's trying to de-establish the original concept, which was a very clear-cut line between the good and the bad. Obi-Wan Kenobi never changed his mind about that, did he? I don't think it ever happened. So the fact that Yoda's been written in such a way that at the end, it's like, You can destroy the records of the wills, you know. I mean, luckily that we see that it has been aboard the Millennium Falcon now, you know, and we see that the books have survived. But just the idea that Luke Skywalker himself would be okay with destroying the book, that Yoda himself would be okay with destroying the book. That's a new mentality, and that's where Luke Skywalker, as I see it, does not fit into that belief system. Yoda walking into or starting to believe in that belief system sounds so contradictory to itself. It was hard to buy from all the old fans, all the original people that got the original concept of the original series have a problem with that. I guarantee if you ask them, that has an issue. Now, I know a lot of people had issues with the comedy part of it. A lot of people, that's not Star Wars. I agree 100%. It isn't Star Wars. I was confused when I walked out because I called my sister on the phone right away. And she asked me how I liked it, and I'm like, okay, I did like it. I honestly enjoyed the movie as an individual movie. I started laughing right away. I laughed more than I should have. I enjoyed it. I remember looking down at the watch and going like, wow, I haven't even seen the new AT-AT walkers show up yet. And I remember thinking how long this film was before we even got to that part. And not in a bad way. I mean, it was like, wow, they really packed a lot. But they packed so much excitement as a film. They paced it right as a film. But it wasn't, the reason it wasn't satisfying was because all the elements that makes a continuation of a story feel like it's missing. As we all know, we've heard it hundreds and thousands of times already. You know, you see all the other reviews on YouTube already that give you the details of the problems within the film. Once again, we're sticking within the philosophy, not just the film as a film itself or as a movie or following Star Wars. You know, the idea of what fanboys disagree with and the details of stories, okay, that's fine. Take it or leave it. But where I think at a core is disturbing is the fact that is Disney talking to a new generation with new formats, new belief system, new directions to give them their own new stories to go to and forget everything that was taught by the original ones. Now, I get it. At the end, they left it with hope, a new hope for the new Jedis for the galaxy, and that anybody could be a Jedi, you know. And it doesn't matter which lineage it comes from. I get that that's what they were selling, but at the same time, there was a very distinct fashion to take the original cast and basically, I want to say castrate them, basically make them powerless. Everybody was complaining that Luke should have been there. Luke should have been there. Without a doubt, he should have been out there fighting instead of just his spirit across the whole, the whole universe and galaxy and fighting. It's just not in contact with somebody who has so much conviction that gets up and shows up themselves, you know? And I think the new generation of writers and directions are not really thinking it from the spiritual perspective of what Star Wars was created from. Once again, this isn't an argument or an issue about your beliefs or not beliefs in God or religion. I'm just trying to bring up what I know for a fact its original intention was from George Lucas's mind and where Disney's taking this to or allowing it to be taken to in new directions and new ways. The idea that the Force, let's talk about Leia for a second. Prime example, a lot of people, you can't do that with the Force or this. Well, first of all, powers are powers. And whether it's been shown what it can do or not, it's irrelevant. Okay? The point being made was that when you have certain powers and you discover what you can do with it, and she's lived long and aged enough and wise enough to have tapped on whatever she could, that was a gift she was able to bring out from her own powers, as she had faith in herself and learned on her own what her abilities were. It doesn't matter if anybody had ever seen those powers or not. I got the concept that she would be able to create this bubble around her of protection that would cause a force field to keep oxygen within it before she lost the final piece of it. I did not like the flying, they should have had a spaceship come over and pick her up while she tried as hard as possible to keep this force field, from breaking apart. And her whole force should have been in meditating and concentrating to keep her air bubble, to keep her alive, and let a spaceship, those are simple things that could have been taken care of. But it's not always about how or what you're capable of doing with the force. Is that everybody individually has had a personal experience who's force sensitive and could have basically learned on their own after 20, 30 years. You have to expect they've explored that and experimented with that on their own time, So I can see Leia being able to take care of that. Overall, I really, truly enjoyed the movie. I did, honestly did. It's sad that it left me with a feeling that the magic of Star Wars is gone because of lack of planning. When I saw JJ started again, I understand some people felt it was rebooted, refreshed. That's fine, but at least they kept a certain intactfulness. They kept certain things intact about the original characters. I don't know why people feel they have to kill off all the old characters in order to keep going forward in the series. I mean, we started with a series with an old man like Ben Kenobi, got killed off, stayed as a Force ghost throughout. Darth Vader technically was an old man already in the trilogy. And we talked about a history in the past. So I don't think that we necessarily have to kill every single character off in this last series. I mean, I understand that now they killed Luke off and they killed off Han, and then with Leia being gone, with Carrie Fisher being gone, Leia, of course, they're gonna have to figure out how to deal with that, and which means basically they got rid of all of them, and it's kind of sad because even though it's going forward, I don't think the only way to go forward was to get rid of all those characters. I think those characters were important to keep intact in a Star Wars universe. Even if they finish the stories and start new stories in another part of the galaxy, and Luke's not going to be there, you didn't necessarily have to kill them all off, I think that's trying too hard to say, okay, that's the past. Let's kill off the old generation because we have our new belief system. I think part of the magic that made Star Wars magical was the sincerity and the simplicity of the storyline. George Lucas said, this is a story about a family. And maybe that's why I am so dedicated to the films themselves. I'm hardcore dedicated to the films and the history of the films. I don't really pay attention too much to the books. I don't pay attention to the other history created. Why? Because it's so easy to change. I think films should have always been straight storylines. I'm kind of disappointed that JJ would start something like The Force Awakens. It'd be handed to somebody else to create a brand new story just based on where JJ left off without any roadmap on where all three movies should have gone. In other words, if you're going to have 7, 8, 9, Disney knew they were going to be together. They should have wrote an idea for a whole storyline that stays together, not just left it for the next director to come up with a whole new story. And then the chapter 9, then they have to figure out how to tie that to the previous story again and be doing a lot of guesswork. When you're doing that much guesswork, the story's going to be all over the place. And I think that's why it's failing right now, based in the sense that such a hard riff now. They wanted to experiment. They wanted to be bold, new directions, but they didn't keep the story intact. And that story was so important because it has so many important issues of moralities and rights from wrongs and what makes us human beings, or what makes us ticks. It really touches deep into people's emotions and feels at all ages, and sometimes I'm not even sure they understand that. So once again, Star Wars philosophy concentrates on how it is that Star Wars, such a simple set of entertaining movies, people are so in tune with it because some people live by it, and some people live by the philosophies, and some people live by their by the message they're using underneath to keep you entertained and tell these stories. It touches the roots of people's beliefs. It touches the roots of people's struggle. It touches the roots of people's insecurities. And it definitely touches our state in the universe, you know, and even in our own earth when it comes to wars and when it comes to the desperate decisions that need to be made. So even though it is entertaining and it's put in a fantasy setting, we know that George Lucas made it clear that these were from very philosophical perspective studies that he did first in order to create this story. And the best place to put it was in a science fiction environment. Therefore, people would see it as entertainment. And you're not necessarily getting preached to that, like, you know, you should stay away from the bad and go to the good and always do good, because people unfortunately don't like to be preached to, or, you know, one person's preaching and somebody else is giving advice to. So, you know, life has changed in very drastic ways. Now, I want to give an example of philosophy that I believe that I understand why it was done, but it can also hurt when you change a lot in a certain way of life. For instance, prime example, I remember when I was a kid and I used to see, you know, the Partridge Family and I Love Lucy, and I used to watch especially like the Brady Bunch. Okay, you used to have the parents, even there was a separate divorced parents already, you know, it was with different kids coming together as a family. It was not seen as real life. People were complaining consistently. I used to remember hearing this in the news that, oh, you know, what people see on TV is not real life. We have to make it more realistic. And they ended up bringing eventually like shows like Married with Children, which was total opposite of the Brady Bunch. The truth is, I learned a lot from the Brady Bunch. The truth is that I got life's teachings in many ways, not just from my parents, but the consistency of watching the Brady Bunch, of the parents telling them what's right and what's wrong and what they should stand up for and not, was the way I lived my life. So by the media consistently saying that, you know, life is not like that, I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm sure a lot of people's lives weren't like that, but there was still another segment of life that was very, you know, set in their ways and moralistic and how to do things that makes right and wrong. As people started questioning things and they're like, oh, my life is not like that, therefore why should we be doing shows like that? But at the same time, I was influenced by Star Wars. I was influenced by so much that I wanted to become a filmmaker, and I wanted to be a hero, and I wanted to be a stuntman, and I wanted to be a, you know, good person over bad. And it's like, and how can I change the world? And, you know, how can I be a nobody and grow up to change things and influence others? A lot of it had to do with those beliefs. So by saying that wasn't real life, I believe they got it wrong. That was not true. I think for a lot of people who were conservative livers who lived, I grew up very in a religious household. Everybody wasn't, and we got sent to church every week. And you know why we got sent to church every week? Because we want to make sure that we stayed out of trouble. Now, most of us did stay out of trouble because of that. Some people, there's no guarantee, but it did help because 5 out of the 6 of us in my family, out of the 6 kids, tended to stay completely away from trouble from what we learned. A lot of it was influenced on the shows we watched. A lot of it was influenced by the things we saw on a regular basis. When you grow up with Married with Children, you would have kids act out, you know, and start behaving that way, because when they watch that and consistently, they start mimicking what they see around them, whether they believe that or not. That's what happens. So eventually the shows get more daring, more daring, more daring. And next thing you know, all the what used to be very tightly influential started loosening its grip on things. And a lot of shows that were could be seen as obscene and could be seen as very disrespectful started getting their laugh time. People were laughing at these shows and indirectly became part of their lives, indirectly became part of how they talk, indirectly it became part of how everyone started behaving with each other, selfishly, do what I want, let me get my way, and honestly, I saw a certain pattern that was forming. So when I used to go back and watch things like Star Wars, it was very, very clear on what Star Wars stories represented. I think a lot of Star Wars prequel parts got confused because after 30 years, George Lucas started concentrating on the history of it all and started getting busy creating this history and this politics that ended up where they ended up in the original trilogies, that he forgot the basis of what made such a clear, concise story in the first three. At this point with the last three, I don't know where it's going. I don't know if they even have a focus. They're so busy just trying to tell a story without too much philosophy in the background that it has no anchor, and maybe that's why there's not a whole life to it. They're entertaining, yes, but if they have an anchor of a strong impact, I think that's why it's so hard. I think people deep inside want that deep impact from the original trilogy. They got the feel of filming it that way. That they did. Like people say now that Star Wars tends to have the feel of Star Wars. But the story's never consistent enough with its original intention. And I think that's why we're losing a grip on it. I think Disney has a specific experimentation process going on right now. And they're going to throw a lot of things in the air till they work, because they're in it to make money, one, entertain a young audience. And I don't think they went in it with the original, I want to say, the original impact that George Lucas wanted to have with kids about what to believe in and what to go for. There's so many different perspectives of believing. Everybody has different beliefs. Even the idea, the Asian belief of yin and yang is different than Christianity and so. And now they're mixing them more and more, the philosophies, that there's no solid direction it's taking. They're just kind of experimenting to make everybody fit into it, make everybody feel like part of Star Wars. Will it work? It's a new generation. So, I think there's a lot more, sense of going away from religion or not believing, but just believing in science and in self. And in, the hope comes from just wanting to be kind, and that's it. Some people, anybody can be kind. You can be a Christian, a Muslim, an atheist, or whatever, and you can be kind. So being kind comes in from everyone, But when it gets to the root of things, and you go a lot deeper, you'll realize that the original Star Wars was more than just kindness, or basic superficial things, kind acts. It was just a truth of, at a core level, belief that you must represent what you believe in 100%, willing to die for it at all cost. And I don't think Disney really knows how to handle that. I think they're busy trying to reach an audience that they can bank on every time. And I'm not sure they even care about if it has to have any kind of belief system in Star Wars itself. I think they'll keep tampering with it. They'll keep making it about people, and that's why their Han Solo movie and who knows if they do a Leia movie, who knows if they do a Kenobi movie. It's about the individual now. It's not about the individual's hardcore beliefs anymore. So I think it's losing its grasp on it's losing its grasp on the people for that reason. I think that's why people are saying I'm done with Star Wars. I told my sister I was kind of like, I think I'm over Star Wars because it's made for a new generation and I'm not understanding it anymore. I don't see its focus. I don't even want it. I don't even look forward to its answers anymore, which is sad because I used to tell myself like, man, I hope I don't die until I see all the Star Wars movies, the main ones at least, the trilogies. And it's sad that I haven't gotten to the 9th one and I'm already saying, I think I'm over it. And it was because of The Last Jedi for not following a solid guideline on a story which was started. It was completely, it was completely able to follow a guideline used to present a story that attaches well together. Even if the story wasn't fully written, it should have had a way that made sense. Now Star Wars is not making any sense, unfortunately. Star Wars is just going, well, from movie to movie, we're just going to create a new story. We're going to create a new direction. We might use the new characters, we might not. We might take a whole brand new look, we might not. I don't know. We'll think of it when we think. And I think that's when sequels stop working. When the magic of what holds it all as one long continuous story that the soap opera's gone. The soap opera's going to disappear there, and I'm not sure how much we can keep it together unless it has an absolute value at its core. If you want the biggest audience possible, I know they're aiming the children now, but if what made this so special is that we all came together, the young children, the teenagers, and the old school original fans of the series came together to make this film as popular as it was. And that's why it made so money, even though there's a big giant split on it. That's exactly why it's banked. But that doesn't mean the movie was considered a good Star Wars movie. Everybody went to see it because we were all that attached to it. Now it's detaching people. Now the old people or the old school people are starting to want to, it's not for me anymore. It's not for my people anymore. Now, I would have followed it no matter what. But I really found myself very detached from it once you start giving stories to characters that just randomly get thrown at it. Let's just throw them this story and it's done. There's not a hardcore process put into it, thinking of what this character is really like, what he should continue to be like, or even if he turns to the dark side or something, give him a legitimately believable reason why he would do that. They're not putting that much thought into it. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. And what you want to talk about in the future, let me know. Once again, we're going to talk a lot of philosophies, a lot of spiritual, social connotations to what Star Wars is. We'll cover individual movies, what kind of philosophies they were talking about during each individual movies in the coming up parts. Okay, so if you have anything you want to talk about, let me know. And feel free, if you want to be a guest on the show, let me know. If you want to film me a clip of your questions or your comments or whatever, send them to sirjackmusicfilms@gmail.com, sirjacfilms@gmail.com. Okay, until we see you in our second episode, Star Wars Philosophies signing out.